find it. I've got it recording. Okay, Dr. Revis, if you want to get started.
Okay, well, good evening, all, and I hope you enjoyed a little bit of a fall break. We still made you work and do some work, but I hope you did enjoy not having to come online last week. We enjoyed it as well, and so we are beginning our 10th week. And guys, you are in the short rows, and we are going to quickly wind down the AAPTEL quicker than you can believe. So, with that said, uh, Dr. Stemmen, you want to pull up the agenda?
Okay, let me share. Um, Somebody help me find, just go back and look and help me find where the mid-semester feedback was that I mentioned a few weeks ago. So when I pull it up, you can help me get right to it.
It's on week 8.
Week 8, okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let me pull the agenda. Okay, here we are, Dr. Revis.
Okay, so you can see that we're going to look at that mid-semester feedback here in just a moment. And I don't really think, Dr. Stedman, we need to do much review on task 1 of the APTEL. I will say that for the most part, at least all of my students did a really good job. A few of you backslid and forgot some APA in-text citation formatting. And so I've asked you to fix that. A few of you forgot and overcapitalized on your references. Remember that when you're citing the title of the works, the only thing that's capitalized would be your first word, proper nouns, of course, and the first word after a colon, semicolon, those kinds of things. So, but most of you did a real good job. You went straight through it. You did some really good literature reviews. Now, we purposefully didn't tell you how long does each section of those 5 sections that you had to research, how long should those be? And you had to have 3 distinctly different resources. And, I would expect 3 well-developed paragraphs out of each section. If they're 2 really deep and thorough and long paragraphs, that may be fine. But it kind of looked like for a few people, you got down to the last couple of sections and maybe ran out of time, and you got a little brief there. So I've asked you to go back and be a little more thorough and deeper in those last couple of sections. So you have to use the research that you did in task 1 to proceed to task 2, which we will go over tonight. Dr. Stemman, do you have any comments on your task
I
1?
do. First of all, 2 people still owe it to me. I'm just going to say, first of all, welcome back. I'm glad to see everybody. But that's unacceptable. I'm just being plain. It's unacceptable at this point. Late work, not turning in work at all. It is unacceptable. Um, and I'm going to love you still, but I'm not. Dr. Revis and I, we're not going to put up with that. We're training you to be an administrator, and the role of administrator. This is not a good. It's not a good practice. So we're gonna push it, and we're going to reflect it in your grades as well, because we have high expectations for you. So please know that. My biggest concern was don't backslide on APA. Nothing has changed from the APSL to the APTEL. It's all the same. And one of the biggest things, Dr. Revis, that I'm still dealing with a few is still you double space consistently. Everything that you do must be double spaced. So, go back and do a self check at the end to make sure of that. Remember, with your intake citations, And a few examples, remember, if it's 3 or more, you got to put et al. In there. You only put the first one and et al. You don't put all 3 in there. So, little things like that. You've got to go back and do a self-check on this. And at this point, we're not saying you're going to be perfect, but you should be almost perfect at this point in those things. And I had several Dr. Revis that were just on spot with their work. It was little, just minor stuff, almost perfect the first time. But I've got to shout out to this person because it probably was, I mean, and even her peer reviews that have come back already said this about her. But Chelsea Hauser, it was letter perfect in every way. So, a lot of good ones, and but Chelsea, that's a shout out for the work. And I have to also say, in her peer review, a lot of times at this point, students get complacent and they think, well, I don't have to do as much. No, you got to plow to the end of the road. And with this being a new evidence, the feedback for this task 1 and task 2 should be as strong as any you have ever done, because you're looking at something entirely different. The feedback not only helps you, but it helps your peers as well. So, just make sure that you're not letting down your guard or letting down your standards, and continue to give us the quality work that we expect of you, and that we know you can do now because you've done it for us. So with
And
that being said,
we're not
we
trying to
can
be superly.
do what, Dr.
Go
Revis?
ahead.
No, you
I
go
was
ahead.
just saying we're not trying to be superly tough on you, but guys, you've got to learn APA.
Right.
Your instructors from here on out are not, they're just gonna send you work back and tell you to fix it. They're not even going to point to what to fix. And so you've got to know how to do in-text citations. You've got to know that. You've got to know how to format a figure. You've got to know how to cite all of your reference entries and to put together a correct appendices. You got to know those things. And it's all about patterns. So you got to learn them, very basic stuff, and you should be able to conceptually be able to remember those things. Now, every once in a while, you may have to go look something up, and that's okay. We do too.
Right.
But those
Um,
common things you've got to learn.
and before we go back and look at the mid-semester review feedback, let's go to Qualtrics. At this point, everybody should be clear with Qualtrics, because you should have completed what you needed to do, and you got the message that you were to send it to Dr. Lamb instead of Dr. Stone, and that was a decision they made after that was out of Dr. Revis and my hands, and we tried to make you aware of it as soon as we knew what to do. Are there any questions about Qualtrics at this time? I don't want to camp out too long on something that we don't need to. Is there anybody who does not know what you're supposed to do with the Qualtrics process? That's for those 5, and we've already told you what they are, for the 5 prompts that you're going to put in for your survey that was identified in task 1 and will be implemented in task 2. Any questions? Well, that sounds good, Dr. Revis. And Dr. Revis, so that we don't have to deviate from things, let's go ahead. For the competency folio and internship, for the competency folio, I sent back, you need to go back to the discussion. This is Dr. Revis's class. You need to go back to the discussions and see if I ask you to make any adjustments there. I think some may have not gone back there, because there were 2 or 3 that I said, you need to make some adjustments here. And I have not seen anything back from that. So go back and look, and if it applies to you, we need that done now, because I don't need you to have to deal with this and then deal with what you've got to finish in just a few weeks at the end of the program. You need to understand now what I'm expecting out of you and Dr. Revis is expecting out of you, so that you can get it clear. So when you finish up at the end of the semester, you won't have the same problems and issues. Dr. Revis, anything at all about that from your end?
I have one of your students who has turned in neither. And then I have everybody has cleared, other than that one, everyone has cleared your mid-semester clinical hours with me. And there were some revisions and you guys jumped right on it. I appreciate that. And then I've got two who haven't submitted anything on their competency folio. Everyone else is clear and made revisions. And so we're good to go, except for those two students.
And Dr. Revis, I haven't asked you, but after tonight, I want to know who they are. That's unacceptable. And I'm going to love you still, but we're going to have a come to Jesus meeting about it, because you cannot do this. You cannot, this, again, we'll have a talk about it. Okay. I'm going to stop my share. Who was the one that said that it was on week 8 a while ago? Who told me that?
I did.
Okay, I stop share. If you would share your screen and pull it up for me, please. That'll be the easiest thing to do.
There you go. Module 8, the course feedback right here.
The course feedback.
That's what it said.
Yes. Is it open yet? Okay. Okay.
Not
It
yet.
may not open, so just check. If it opens, fine. If it doesn't, fine. I'm just trying to honor it doesn't come to us anyway. It goes to somebody else. But if it never opens up, then you don't have anything to worry about. Okay. And I'll ask Dr. Stone about it. And whatever it is, it's not going to be major anyway, but don't worry about it if it doesn't open up. Okay, thank you. You can unshare now. Dr. Revis, I'm going to pull up the helpful hints document so that we can just do a quick review of here it is. Just a quick review of task 2 and see if they have any questions, because at this point, you should already be working on that.
So task 2 is where you actually administer the survey and you analyze results. And that is where you actually do your walkthroughs, I think 3 to 5 walkthroughs, and analyze those results. So in the first prompt, prompt 1, you're going to narratively talk. I think we need to go back a little earlier in the
Okay, I'm sorry.
document.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay.
Prompt 1 is about your analysis. Okay. And so what you have to do, you still have 5 headings, and those 5 headings are the same 5 headings that you did research on. So what you're doing is a gap analysis. You're looking at the research, what the research says happens in highly effective schools. If your school is a school with high efficacy and teacher empowerment among the staff, then you've already researched what that looks like. So the first thing you do, and there's a pattern here, in each section, you will take at least one paragraph and reiterate some of the most important information that you can pull from your research that you did in task 1. So this person chose, under building efficacy and empowerment, they chose to look at some of Whitaker's work. And I don't blame him because, he's done a lot of work on teacher empowerment and efficacy. Of course, he's not the godfather of efficacy. That would be Bandura, but his work is more current, of course, and probably very much so grounded in Bandura's work. But it starts off by, based on the research that I did in task 1, these are the things that should be happening in our schools. You just summarize. Now, again, don't just regurgitate everything that you put down in your task 1 for this section. But pretty quickly, after you summarize what should be happening, then you talk about what is happening in your school. So look at this third paragraph here. When comparing empowerment opportunities to the data collected in the survey for best teacher practices, there are several gaps between high school practices observed and what the research identifies as best practices. That has to be in every section. So you see, they start talking about the survey. Now you're going to use your survey work extensively in task 1. You may have a couple places that you can work in your walkthrough data, but most of these sections, you're going to pull data from the survey. So you see, this person talked about how many teachers took the survey. The survey was distributed to 24 teachers with 17 responses.
And
Out of those 17,
Dr. Revis, note 24 and 17 is written incorrectly. That's why I highlighted it.
Okay, thank you. 41% of the teachers at the school feel as though they have input on professional development, and 35% indicated they play a role in the hiring process. Okay, those are low numbers in my opinion. The survey results also indicate that 42% of teachers have input into the development and or management of the school budget, with 65% of teachers indicating they play a role in setting school-wide policy. So they present the data, and then this person also pulled some things from the walkthrough checklist. Now, remember, this is building efficacy and teacher empowerment. I guess efficacy in this perspective with a walkthrough, if your instrument looked at teacher engagement probably, or student engagement, excuse me, and if you had high ratings of implementing and teacher scoring high on that walkthrough, I guess you can make that connection to having a high sense of efficacy and teacher empowerment. So they chose to go ahead and talk about the walkthrough checklist in here as well. But you identify gaps in each of these areas. Okay.
And look at the concluding paragraph. It says, and this was in bringing conclusion to this section. After collaboratively discussing this topic during my PLC meeting, my team identified classroom efficacy and teacher empowerment in the classroom as a strength. Teacher empowerment was identified as an observable strength in the classroom, but was not reported as a strength on the teacher perception survey. This indicates a gap in the area of teachers' perception of efficacy and empowerment between research-based best practice. That's an excellent conclusion. And again, as Dr. Revis has said, remember In task 1, you're doing the research. Task 2, this is what it should look like based on the research. What you do in task 2 is you're actually taking and saying, based on, your walkthroughs, the surveys or whatever, research says this. This is actually what I find in my school. And you are narratively talking about any gaps in there, and you need to be detailed with it as this person has, and make sure you're covering all of your bases. Are there any questions at this point about how you're to proceed with task 2?
Dr. Stedman, I guess I should have backed up and made it clear that you do all the data collection and data analysis, and you're presenting the research and the school data to your PLC.
Right.
And they are helping you collaboratively come up with your gaps.
Right.
Now, I have had students before did not identify one gap. Can't do that. You have to identify a gap. And, even if you have high responses on the survey and high efficacy on your walkthrough, you still have to identify a gap, a relative gap, so that you can build, you have to build like an action plan. So you still do need to identify some gaps.
And Dr. Revis, we're not going to go through each of the headings. You see, it's the same headings that you had in task 1, you have in task 2. Again, research in task 1. Task 2 is the results of what you find in your school. And it follows the very same process with every one of them. Remembering that you're reporting back to your team, and your team, basically your concluding paragraph in each of these sections should basically surmise what your team and you decided about that particular heading or that area. Am I right, Dr. Revis?
Yes, your concluding paragraph should identify gaps.
Right. Okay, and you follow the same process all the way through. So let me come on down. I don't want to go too fast with this and lose my.
So this writing is very similar to some of the writing that you did in your data dive in your AAPTEL, because this is very technical writing where you're looking at data and you are reporting data. And be sure that it's clear that you've done the analysis, you're sharing results with your PLC, not only just data, but share with them some of those most important pieces of research that you found in task 1 about the different areas.
Okay, and remember there are 2 prompts to task 2. And let me go over this first, and then we'll break prompt 2 down for you. Walk through data is to be graphically and narratively explained in prompt 2. Now, remember, you're going to do your 2 things. Your walkthrough, the walkthroughs, the 3 to 5 that you do. And then it is hopeful that you will talk with your principal, assistant principal, your it could be your coaches, anybody that does walkthroughs that can provide you on, again, that can be a qualitative informal survey that you do, or a meeting you have with them, and they can talk to you about what they see. I would ask, in the walkthroughs, in your walkthroughs, what do you see as the strengths of the school? What do you see as areas of concern? And you may want to talk to more than one, and you narratively talk about that. If there's any graphic information they can provide you, it will only strengthen your work if you're able to provide some of that as well. But remember, your walkthrough data must be graphically explained and narratively explained, impromptu. And remember, we don't want to see the walkthrough instruments completed on each teacher. We want to see graphic information on the results of your walkthroughs. We don't need
Like
to
your
see
summary data.
the
Like your
summary data.
summary data.
Right. We don't need to see the whole walkthrough completed on these people with their name and everything on it. That's not what we're looking for. We want you to interpret, talk about your experience and interpret, what you saw in your walkthroughs. And then again, make sure you include, as much as you can about others already in the role of completing walkthroughs, what they have to say about them as well. And then number 2, this is also the section where you will provide narrative results of, well, I've just talked about that. So you're going to talk about that as well. Data are graphically presented in prompt 2. You will show the results of the survey and other data collected during the 3 to 5 days of observations in the forms of charts, tables, graphs, etc. Remembering that even though you're using charts, tables, graphs, etc., according to APA for these purposes, everything will be identified as figures. And then finally, you will provide graphic and narrative data for your personal walkthrough experiences, as we've talked about already. Okay.
Now, guys, I'll just share this, Dr. Stedman.
Uh-huh.
A couple of my students got marked down by the evaluator, and the work got sent back because they did not put the graphics within the body of the text. They're not going to go, your evaluators in task stream, they're not going to rifle back through and look to see if it's in your appendices. Put your graphic information, your figures, within the body of the text. Okay.
And they don't need to be in 2 places. If you're in the body of the text, they don't need to be in the appendices.
Right. Now, guys, I will tell you this. The way I think of organizing this, I think of prompt 1 as being you're really digging thoroughly and deeply on your survey results. I think of prompt 2 is you're really diving in and talking about your walkthroughs, how many you did, what grade levels. You need to talk about all of that. Give some background information. And I like to think of prompt 2 as being focused just on the walkthrough. So you can really dig into it narratively and with your figures. Do not send it in without doing figures.
And because 99% of the students ended up with a 4, and the others, you still had an A overall, with the scores you've got. Don't get complacent with that and think I have arrived. I promise you, task 2 they will scrutinize that much more intensely than they did task 1. Am I right, Dr. Revis?
I think so. I think the evaluators
Yeah.
are kind of like we are. We know you're just getting started.
Right.
And so we try to give you multiple opportunities. We try to give you very, very specific feedback, but they're gonna score you a little bit tougher on this AAPTEL than they did the APSL.
And they will. So and again, with the figures, when you go and with your figure, make sure that you make it big enough. This is too small. It's just hard to read. So don't make it too large, but make it large enough that that whoever's looking at it can read it carefully. But this is an example of how they broke down, information. This was 4th grade small group reading, and this is what they said that they saw. Your figures can be similar, they can be different. We're not telling you. You are to interpret it narratively, and you are to interpret it with other graphic information based on how you feel. So we're not going to stifle your creativity with that. If there's something you want to do differently than this, then that's okay. But remember, we should see multiple graphics in there, not just a single graphic. I like the way that they have done figure 4 here, where, this is just it's easy to read and understand. But remember, between the yes and the no, it should always equal 100 of the, and I would actually talk about, out of the surveys I sent out, X number of surveys, or there's so many teachers, talk about the percentage of actual teachers that responded back. And again, you want to get as many as you can, but you don't have a lot of control over that. Either they do or they don't. But look how they've done this. With the surveys, they've talked about it up here with the percentages. Then down here, they have graphically represented it with the pie charts. Very easy to understand. That's 2 ways of giving the same information on that. Dr. Revis, if you'd like to conclude with the gap analysis.
Now, here's your vital piece. This is where your evaluator is really going to hone in on. They want to know your summary gap analysis. And this is what you're actually going to lift to do your action plan or teacher empowerment and leadership improvement plan. So you need to list very clearly, and it should be more than just one thing. It should be several things. I would say, can you scroll back up, Dr. Stedman, to that summary chart on the survey? Go back down just one more time. There we go.
There we go.
I don't know if we can get it all. I can look at this very quickly and say, you've got an issue with teachers not having input on professional development. You've got an issue about input on development and management of the school budget, and you've got an issue in this school about teachers playing a role in the hiring process.
Actually,
You got some issues.
Dr. Revis, 41 should be up there where the yes and no is. So the problem is with empowerment, and then this 82 should be right there.
Right. Okay. So you see what I'm saying? I as an evaluator, and I being the one that's looking at your work, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say in his summary, if he doesn't choose those 3, something's wrong. I'm also going to look at your walkthrough data. Let's look at the summary for that.
Okay.
I think it's back up maybe.
Okay. Yeah. That's it right there.
Okay, so I'm looking here at this walkthrough data. Very quickly, I'm going to see you got whatever that bottom one is, cues, questions, advanced organizers. Nobody had that. That's an area. Also with homework and practice. That's an area that we're going to delve into because you didn't see that at all. Now, if this is actually your walkthrough data from your school, actually your walkthrough instrument from your school, probably you don't use Marzano's, and you use Marzano's in the absence of you having one. But very definitely, if you have a walkthrough instrument that your school is actively using and you get this kind of data, zeros in categories, you've got some problems.
And Dr. Revis, and it's no fault of yours, but I had a couple of students to say that, that in the process of doing this assignment, that they discovered that their school had a walkthrough instrument.
Right. Right.
So that tells you that there's an issue there. If you're just now discovering it, it's not being implemented with fidelity, and that can become a part of your plan of action whenever you get to that in task 3. So just remember that. But again, this last part, let me get past this. This gap analysis, this is vitally important. You should spend some good time in there and make sure that you say what you need to say, and you say it well. Okay? This is
again, you're setting the stage and the tone for what you're going to do in task 3 right here.
Right. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Okay. Before we go for questions, how many of you, just by show of hand, how many of you are already actively working on task 2? Okay. That's what I was hoping to see. Okay, Stuart?
Yeah, I was wondering, I've done 2 walkthroughs thus far, and of the 2 classes I've observed with my pre and post observation conferences, the 2 teachers literally have no lesson planning whatsoever. They're just winging it. So if I were to bring that data back to 0 lesson planning, but that's what the data says. So
Well,
what do I do with that?
You say it like it is. You tell the truth, because this is a gap. Now, what administration does with it when you present your action plan after task 3, what they do with it's entirely left up to them, Stuart. You're just bringing what you have found, and then it's out of your hands. Then you're actually going to talk about that in the action plan. You're going to make it a recommendation, and again, remember when you're presenting, remember that you be careful what you say and how you say it, because you're before your administration. That's just a word of wisdom, okay? All of you. Solomon? Or not Solomon, Rico.
I guess I got a little confused. Can we use our school walkthrough instrument, or do we have to use the one that was?
No, you have a choice. If your school has one, that's what we said. We recommended for you to use that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Salita?
May I say something further to Rico?
Yeah.
Rico, if you actually use your school walkthrough, you need to go back to task 1 and make sure you've identified that in task 1. Okay.
That's an easy fix, Rico.
Yeah.
That's an easy fix on that. Okay, Salita?
For the data for the learning walk, so at my school, I'll use the same like form and it goes into one big data hub. Is it okay if I use the chart from everybody's collective data, or do you just need mine separate? Because if that's the case, I gotta start over.
Are you doing the walkthroughs as with a team or by yourself?
Sometimes, and then some of the ones I've done by myself.
Okay, then you've got an opportunity to show 2 different things there. Then, these were my personal walkthroughs, and then it's almost like instructional rounds like they do at a hospital when the doctors and the interns and all walk together. Then you can talk about, and this is the results, and you need to talk about, but you need to show collectively everything that you're doing. So
Okay,
I would say talk about, both experiences.
Okay, that's not a problem, but it's okay if I use the collective chart, because like it goes into a Google form, so it makes a pie chart. Or
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I want to make sure.
Yeah, because it would all be the same whether you're with them or you're not with them, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, Is everybody good? You know what to do with task 2? Everybody got a plan? Okay, everybody's good. Okay. Dr. Revis, I don't want to overdo it, but I think we have no choice but to at least show them task 3, because some will be at a place to begin looking at that. However, we will camp out with task 3 next Tuesday, but we need to at least talk with you about it, or share it with you, so you'll know the direction that you're going in.
Well, in task 3, when you see it, guys, it's very similar to what you had to do in the AAPTEL in task 4 of the AAPTEL when you were building an action plan. So you're going to see lots of similarities.
Right. Dr. Revis, would you like to just start out with that?
Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to, again, take those areas, those gap areas, and you're going to build a teacher empowerment leadership growth plan. We're going to build strategies that will address teachers not being in on interviews with other teachers, or how do we get teacher input? How do we make sure teachers get input in professional development? Whatever your gaps are, okay? But you must develop that action plan based on your gaps. Now, in this task, at the end of it, you're going to have to do a presentation. And that presentation needs to be, it says, to the school administration and to the school improvement team at the principal's discretion. You may or may not get to the school improvement team, but you need to do it at least to the school administrative team or part of your team.
Dr. Revis, I'm going to make and I know you'll agree with me, we're going to make a call on this.
Okay.
You've got some evaluators that will mark you down if it's not before, if the school improvement team is not mentioned there. So try to do it before the school improvement team. At a minimum, make sure it's your administration and your PLC team and anybody else you can pull in there, and you call it your school improvement team. But for your practical purposes, that's what it is. We want to see the language school improvement team, because we don't want you marked down for something that you really don't have any control over. Does that make sense, Dr. Revis?
Point. Thank you.
Or do you agree with that?
Oh, yes, good point. Thank you.
Yeah, because some evaluators will not, they won't hold you hostage, but some they don't bend to the left or to the right. So we're not going to give them a reason. Again, try to get the school improvement team, but if you can't, call your PLC, rename it for this purpose, rename it the school improvement team. Okay? Everybody got that? Okay, go ahead, Dr. Revis.
Okay, so remember, there is a presentation that you have to make after you complete your action plan, growth plan. Now, guys, the presentation needs to be a culmination of tasks 1, 2, and 3. Okay, where you're sharing some of the best practices, what the research says, where you're showing the gaps that you found in your data, you're presenting your data and showing the gaps, and then you're sharing your action plan.
Dr. Revis, it goes back to what Stuart was saying, because the research says in task 1, when you go into a classroom, again, the two things you're doing, you're looking at teacher leadership in the classroom as a classroom teacher working with their students. And then you're looking for teacher leadership outside that classroom. And that's where the survey comes from. But as Stuart found, whenever he went into the two classrooms that he's observed, there was no there was no roadmap for them to be teaching the students, which is not acceptable. So, when Stewart presents to his administration and the team, he's going to very delicately say, the research says, for effective classroom instruction, that a teacher should be equipped with the following tools, and a lesson plan is blah blah blah, that you go on. However, in my walkthroughs, this is what I discovered. So you're again, it goes back to what Dr. Revis said. You're saying this is what the research says. These are best practices. But then, if it's good when you go in there, you stress that good stuff. But if it's not good, you've got to point that out as well. That's a part of your plan of action.
Good point. And so your headings for this, I don't think we probably need to go into details here,
No.
but you have several headings that you do have to do some research on, and you do have to narratively describe your growth plan that you're developing, just like you did in the APSL. We have given you the same graphic organizer template that you had before in the action plan in the APSL. You'll use the same one, and some of these same headings you've already talked about and already have dealt with. But of course, it's with teacher leadership and empowerment. And so this is just an example of what it looks like. This is one of the headings, and you write a lot of narrative work. You will talk to you next week about the specifics. You will have to do some research, a little bit of research on your own. But anyway.
And remember, this is not your opinion. This is what the research says, the importance of the action plan. So that is, and again, any of the thing you're doing, you make sure that if it requires research, that you have a minimum of 3 references there if it requires research. Okay. And Dr. Revis, all of those headings, I went back through this today just to make sure I looked at it. All of the headings does not necessarily require research, but some of them do, just like a vision for positive school environment. In that, you can maybe have a little bit of opinion in there, but you need to also incorporate, see there, Hattie. You need to make sure that you blend that with what the research says. And I think once you get to them, I think they'll be self-explained. You'll know when you need to do research and when they don't require research. They require, planning with your team, like a list of strategic indicators of success. That's where you and your team are going to actually look for those things that should make a difference. And Dr. Revis, I'm going to pull this down to the a lot of narrative work here. Okay. Notice this is important. Plan for stakeholder involvement and buy-in. This is, how hard it is to get teachers to buy into things. You work with them. You are one. So many of you are. So, how are you going, this is what's happening. What are you going to do to try to ensure, that what you're proposing is they're going to actually accept and follow through with fidelity on that. Dr. Revis, about the formative and summative, who does that apply to?
Okay, we're not talking about students here, right? Formative and summative, we're not talking about students. And remember that. Okay, Dr. Stedman, I've had a senior moment.
Okay.
Formative is where you are talking about fidelity checks to make sure the
Right.
adults in the building are doing what they need to be doing.
Mhm.
Don't talk about formative assessments like we use for students. Remember, your plan here is about teacher growth and empowerment. So what are we going to do to put in for fidelity checks for that formative assessment there?
And what would summative be?
Summative would be, as a result of doing these things, a summative assessment may be that you're going to re-administer this survey at the end of the year or at some future date. And you hope to see an increase in the percentages there in your survey. You want to see some changes, particularly on your school walkthrough. You want to see higher percentages there. Most certainly, we want to see teachers planning. And you just set a goal. You're with your PLC. Well, what is a reasonable goal by the end of the year, so to speak?
And
Um,
with your administration,
right.
because
And with your administration.
again, because with the walkthroughs, again, going back to what Stuart said, if you have those kinds of discoveries, that really is an administrative issue after you have presented it to them.
It's a huge administrative issue.
It is. Okay.
And as future administrators, I'll get on my soapbox. You show me a teacher that flies by the seat of their pants, and I'll show you poor student learning.
Exactly. And then finally, this is the culmination of things. Once you have this is your opportunity to really talk about your presentation should be as professional as you can make it. You go in there prepared. I'm going to say, try to make sure that you get it videoed, for the simple reason it's in the rubric for evaluators. And if for some reason your principal just will not allow it, then you'll have to put a disclaimer in there stating that that your administration would not allow it to be videoed, and make sure that it's highlighted well so that an evaluator knows that. Okay. But to the best of your ability and persuasion, try to get it done. But this is where you're bringing closure to it. You're talking about your presentation and everything, that goes with your presentation. And then finally, Dr. Revis, this is our old faithful.
Right. And again, this needs to be tied directly to those gaps that you identified in task 2. So you make sure that all of this ties together.
Now, remember, this is a professional growth plan for teacher leadership and empowerment. So you need to make sure that professional development is one of your specific activities.
Right. And of course, if your teachers mark low in that statement that they don't have input, then you need to have a strategy, design a strategy that will increase or solicit input into professional development. Look at that one. Create a teacher interview committee. Increase the frequency of walkthroughs. Re-administer the teacher survey, empowerment survey at the end of the year, and so on. So it's got to be related.
And the headings are non-negotiable. They must be exactly as you see them here. Okay. Okay. And again, many of you will not even get to that this week, but I've got a few we've got a few that may be ready to start on that. And we will camp out here much more intensely next week. But do you see where all the work you're doing, do you see where it's all leading to next week? Does everybody understand the process? And then after that, you know, it is the 9 competencies that you have not done, and it's just like task 5 of the AAPTEL, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So you're almost there. You're almost there. You've almost finished the first semester. Almost. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I hope you can. And Dr. Revis, if you would, and bring it closer, their AAPTEL Research and Development Zoom assignment is due this week. And that, again, that goes back with your Zoom team. What would we expect to see from this team assignment?
Okay, well, first of all, guys, you're talking about and sharing information about the research that you have done in task 1 and the gaps that you identified in task 2. That's what you're talking about with this particular Zoom session. We don't give you prompts or discussion starters. By this time, if you guys want to come together or shoot back and forth emails or texts to come up with some discussion questions that the Zoom leader is going to facilitate, that's great. We do expect that if your team has 3 or more people, that everybody has a turn being the Zoom master. And so the Zoom master ultimately needs to do an agenda. Guys, if you're the Zoom master and you don't do an agenda, I'm going to mark you down. Don't ever walk into a meeting as your school leader without an agenda. Now, come on. Don't do that. Don't ever be a Zoom master without having an agenda. So prepare yourself for this, just like, you were a principal in the school, and be ready for to move that discussion along. I would just start out by having everybody share about, so tell me a couple of things that you learned in the research in those 5 areas that you maybe didn't know before you did your research in task 1. And then the other question would be, let's talk about the gaps we found. I don't know. I'm shooting from the hip here. Okay. But that's the crux of it. And we would expect to hear you talking about Ingersoll, Whitaker, Marzano, Darling Hammond, because those are all the researchers that you are required to use in your research in task 1. So, and of course, there are others as well. You had choices of others. So we want to hear you talking about some of those researchers when you talk about what you learned out of doing that research and what you talked about, what you want to talk about when you look at the gaps. I don't know. Those are just my ideas. Dr. Stedman,
well,
do you have any?
and that's it. And pretty much is wide open. I would use this as an opportunity to because you'll still be working on task 2, and you may have some questions that you want to talk about, to help each other out there. But I think your biggest focus would be, since we've introduced task 3, as you are finishing, I would really camp out, and whoever the Zoom team, I would have a big focus on, what this task 3 should look like and the presentation. This is a great opportunity to learn from each other and to get ideas from each other to make it the best presentation that you possibly can make it. So
Also, I would ask that if you're the Zoom master, that you fix your screen so that we can see everybody's face and not just your agenda. That we see your agenda over here, and then we see your the participants over on the side. If you could make sure that happens when you record, that's helpful for us to know who's contributing what.
Okay, that's it.
Any questions on that assignment for this week?
Okay, does everybody, do you have a clear plan? You know what you've got to do this week? And you already have an idea of where this is leading so that you'll be prepared, to hit the road running next week. And once you get through with that, now, when you turn in your work, and we'll talk about this next week, when you get to task 3, you focus on getting your work done. You may not be able to do that presentation, by the end of that week. So don't worry about the presentation when you get to task 3 as much as you do getting your work done. And then we've got some time built in there that if you need Monday or Tuesday of the next week to plan your presentation, by all means, that we'll work with you. And if I need to go back in there and readjust some time on that, we can readjust it so that we'll talk about that next week. But don't focus on the presentation, but not focus on having to do the presentation until you know that your quality work is ready for it. So I doubt you're going to have the presentation done before you submit it for us to look at to see if it's really. In fact, I'm going to tell you, we need to see it before you do a presentation so that we know that you're ready for that presentation. Right, Dr. Revis?
Are you talking about task 3?
Task 3, yeah. So because some of them I know they're overthinkers and they're already thinking about that. We'll talk about that next week, but don't even think about doing the presentation until we give you a definitive plan next week on that, okay? We've got some time built in there, so you'll be okay.
So this week you've got to do task 2.
Right.
Have a PLC meeting and do task 2. Do your narrative, and then do your Zoom meeting. Dr. Stephen, is there any possibility we could move that Zoom meeting to next week, or is that gonna clog us up?
Okay, that won't clog us up. Let's do this. That's fine. We'll just don't even worry about the Zoom meeting this week. Worry about task 2. Okay. Worry about task 2, and I'll go back there and fix it so that you don't get a 0 in there. And if for some reason we forget, don't worry about it. We can fix that. So don't worry about that. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Revis.
I just think that would maybe, I want quality work on this.
I do too.
Okay.
I do too.
And the important piece is your task 2. And for you to be able to meet with your PLC and write a really good narrative. So I appreciate. I think that'll work a little bit better if we.
And I'm going to go ahead and tell them that would mean that after class next week, next Tuesday, that they'll need to come in, and by that Wednesday they need to go ahead and plan their PLC. I mean their Zoom meeting. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, we're going to change the date, and your task 3 is not going to be due. It won't be due on that Sunday night. It'll probably be due on that Tuesday of the next week. And we'll give you some. We're going to extend the time on that. Like Dr. Raven said, I want nothing but quality work on this. So we're going to make sure that and again, we built the time in there so we could do this. Okay.
So that doesn't mean take another break or take a day off.
No.
That means we're expecting quality work. And guys, when you have to do a lot of revisions, that slows you down, doesn't it? Kind of get behind. We don't want to do revisions. By now, your revisions should be minimal. Okay. Do the best work you can do on your submission date, and then you don't have to do any revisions. You can just move on.
Okay. Any more questions? Because we've got to talk to. We need to talk to a few students. So Anything else before we sign out? Okay, Nicole?
I have a silly question, but I'm hoping that somebody else needs it answered. My question is, I don't know how to do graphics for charts. I was hoping that we would hear about Qualtrics, if we could pull it out of Qualtrics, but I don't know how to make those pie charts that we see in the helpful hints. The only way I would be able to fathom doing that, just because I haven't worked with it, is doing a Google form. So if somebody has a suggestion about how to make those figures, I would appreciate it. And if that helps somebody else, then let's go.
Okay, at some
Nicole,
point,
you can
yeah,
pull them
you
out.
can do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if
But
anybody knows how to do that, if you would communicate with Nicole, and maybe just a short Zoom meeting with her, you can get her on the right track with that. So, okay.
I can also say, Nicole, there's lots of free websites out there that can help you create graphs like that. So if it would be easier for you to pull the information out, you can find like a free pie chart website and input that data yourself.
Oh, I'm going to ask you, would you have any free time to meet with Nicole for just a few minutes to share that information with her?
Yeah, if she needs that, I'll put my number in the chat.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks, Julia. Okay, Danielle?
So unfortunately, this is probably not going to help anybody else out.
That's okay.
I have another teacher at my school. We're doing the same program. Obviously, she's in the other class, and so we're using the same survey data. Is it okay that our PLCs during this one are the same, or do we need to do them separately? Because we're working off the same data, the same walkthrough data. We're doing we just went around together. So,
Nicole, you can use the same data, but you must use your own work. You must write it up and put it in your own words when you do your narrative work. Okay.
Can the action plan look the same, since we're going to be doing essentially it's only so many words in the action plan, and just the narrative work around it, obviously bear our own?
Well, here's what you're going to run into. When you go to turn it in, you're going to run into some problems.
That's what I was worried about. Okay.
Is the other person in your class or in a different class?
She's in the other class, so not in our class.
Like Dr. Hamilton's?
Yes.
Okay. I would say this. I'm okay with it as long as you remind me of that. But I can't promise you what the other instructor is going to say.
Okay.
I would just try to think about maybe saying the same thing, but rewording it in a unique way.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Because whoever turns it in second, they're going to get hit on the first one.
Okay. That's what I was worried about. All right. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Savannah?
Hey, I was just going to ask if this agenda is going to be uploaded into the Blackboard.
Okay. It's under week 10.
It wasn't at the start of the class.
In my class, it's there because I put it today. If it's not there, let me know, because I'll go back and look again.
And I think I uploaded it this morning too.
I just put it in this afternoon, that's where I opened it up from, so it was on mine. So I'll go back and look at that, Savannah.
Yeah, I looked at
I'm not seeing it either.
Okay. For some reason it didn't load. I'll go back and look at it then. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Sam.
Yeah, this might not help anybody else other than me either, but my school's walkthrough survey doesn't really have like data I can get from. It's more like the 4.0 grading scale thing. So like, I write down what they've done, what they have. So can I go back and use like the Marzano checklist, like just take my other one out of my task one, replace it, so I actually have like percentages and things I can deal with?
Yeah, Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine with me. You know, the big thing with me is that whatever you really use, you put it in task one and you carry through with it. The big thing for you is, will your principal give you approval to use a walkthrough checklist that the teachers are not familiar with?
Okay.
Does that make
All right. That
sense?
should be good. Yes. Yes, ma'am. It does. Thank you.
Okay. Any other
Okay.
questions? All right, we need to see Shaquana, and who else do we need to see?
Um, I need to speak to just to ask a question. When everybody else checks off, if Casey and Chelsea, if you would hang around for just a second, I need to ask you a question.
And Shaquana, if you'll go ahead and log off, I think I sent you a unique link. Okay.
Okay.
Have a good night, everybody.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Let me stop recording.